In the last lecture, MBO was briefly introduced. Today, we will elaborate more about it because appropriate understanding and implementation of MBO will benefit organizations a lot. Speaking of MBO, many people believe they are very familiar with it. It's not something worth explaining because it has been practiced around the world. Yet, despite the wide application, there are lots of misunderstanding and faulty implementation of MBO. Some still think of it as an appraisal tool. Others see it as a motivational technique. Still, others consider MBO a planning and control device. One common misunderstanding is that some people simply consider SMART model as MBO. After learning today's lecture, you will realize that just knowing SMART model is not enough. Let's explore what MBO is and how it works. Management by Objectives was introduced by Peter Drucker through his book, The Practice of Management, in the year of 1954. As introduced in our previous lecture, MBO is a process of setting mutually agreed upon goals and using those goals to evaluate employee performance. Specifically, if a manager wants to manage by objectives, he needs to sit down with each member of his team and set goals and periodically review whether progress was being made toward achieving those goals. Companies such as Adobe, GE, and Microsoft have replaced the traditional performance ratings with MBO programs. You may have some doubts. MBO was presented more than half a century ago. Is it out of date? Does it still work today? In addition, when practicing MBO, many failure cases were reported. Sony is just a case in point. So, is it still necessary to learn about MBO? In the 1990s, Peter Drucker decreased the significance of this organizational management method into perspective when he said, "It's just another tool. It is not the great cure for management inefficiency. MBO works if you know the objectives. 90% of the time, you don't." Therefore, in order to make MBO work effectively, the most important thing is to clearly understand what is the objective of a business. According to Drucker, there is only one valid definition of business purpose: to create a customer. All the business activities should be directed to this objective. In order to achieve this objective, there are 8 key areas where managers must pursue clear objectives: marketing standing, innovation, productivity, physical and financial resources, profitability, manager performance and development, work performance and attitude, public responsibility. To go further, what Peter Drucker wants to emphasize is that the specific objectives of a business is multiple. So managers need to allocate resources reasonably and pay attention to the performance in each key area. The objectives are what the organization wants to have accomplished, so they must be achievable and challenging. In the meanwhile, while setting goals can be an effective approach to motivate employees. Hence, it is crucial to set the right goals for the right reasons. And now you may realize that setting goals using the SMART model is not that hard. However, the goals set might not be the right ones. Then we need to consider 2 key questions. What should the objectives of managers be? And how should managers' objectives be set? And by whom? What should the objectives of a manager be? MBO in nature is to weld individual efforts into a common effort. Therefore, each manager needs clearly spelled out objectives. These objectives should lay out what performance the man's own managerial unit is supposed to produce. They should lay out what contribution he and his unit are expected to make to help other units obtain their objectives. Finally, they should spell out what contribution the manager can expect from other units toward the attainment of his own objectives. Right from the start, emphasis should be on teamwork and team results. These objectives should always derive from the goals of the business enterprise. The objectives of every manager should spell out his contribution to the attainment of a company goal in all areas of the business. Manager must understand that business results depend on a balance of efforts and results in a number of areas. To obtain balanced efforts, the objectives should also be key to both short-range and long-range considerations. And of course, all objectives should always contain both the tangible business objectives and the intangible objectives. How should the manager's objectives be set, and by whom? A manager is responsible for the contribution that his component makes to the larger unit above him and eventually to the enterprise. His performance aims upward rather than downward. Each manager develops and sets the objectives of his unit himself. Higher management must reserve the power to approve or disapprove these objectives. You may have heard about the term OKR frequently in recent years. OKR means objective and key results. Nowadays, more and more companies are using OKR to replace KPI to manage performance. For example, companies like Intel, Google, Alibaba, Huawei, and so on are using OKR. Actually, the underlying logic of OKR is MBO. Management by objectives is achieved through self-control. As Peter Drucker wrote, the greatest advantage of MBO is perhaps that it makes it possible for a manager to control his own performance. Because self-control means stronger motivation, a desire to do the best rather than just enough to get by. It means higher performance goals and broader vision. MBO cannot work well without self-control. The principle behind management by objectives is to make sure that everybody within the organization has a clear understanding of the aims or objectives of that organization, as well as awareness of their own roles and responsibilities in achieving those goals. The complete MBO system is to get managers and empowered employees acting to implement and achieve their plans, which automatically achieve those of the organization. MBO programs have 4 elements: goal specificity, participative decision-making, an explicit time period, and performance feedback. Instead of using goal to make sure employees are doing what they are supposed to be doing, MBO uses goals to motivate them as well. The appeal is that it focuses on employees working to accomplish goals they are participating in setting. Now let's take a look at the steps in a typical MBO program. Step 1. The organization's overall objectives and strategies are formulated. Step 2. Major objectives are allocated among divisional and departmental units. Step 3. Unit managers collaboratively set specific objectives for their units with their managers. Step 4. Specific objectives are collaboratively set with all department members. Step 5. Action plans, defining how objectives are to be achieved, are specified and agreed upon by managers and employees. Step 6. The action plans are implemented. Step 7. Progress toward objectives is periodically reviewed and feedback is provided. Step 8. Successful achievement of objectives is reinforced by performance-based rewards. These steps will help you better understand MBO. So far in this lecture, we have talked a lot about MBO. Let's summarize the main idea of it. Simply, MBO contains 3 parts. First, all individuals within an organization are assigned a special set of objectives that they try to reach during a normal operating period. These objectives are mutually set and agreed upon by individuals and their managers. Second, performance reviews are conducted periodically to determine how close individuals are to attaining their objectives. Third, rewards are given to individuals based on how close they come to reaching their goals. MBO programs continually emphasize what should be done in an organization to achieve organizational goals, and the process secures employee commitment to attaining the goals. It is very useful in improving enterprise performance. However, as a management tool, MBO is not always 100% bulletproof. For example, the development of objectives can be time-consuming. The elaborate written goals, careful communication of goals, and detailed performance evaluation required in an MBO program increase the volume of paperwork in an organization. What other advantages and disadvantages can you identify? Now I believe you've got the answers to the questions we presented earlier in this lecture. Can you give any examples of how MBO is used in business world or in government? That's all for today's lecture. Thank you.